Peace and love, family. How is everyone doing tonight? It's your girl, dr.maat.msu speaks. Thank you all for joining us again on another edition of the RAM Book Club, Resurgence of the African Mind, where we seek to liberate African minds by reading one unit of work at a time. If you've been following us, you know that we are reading Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. And yes, Dr. Maat is holding up the powerful words by Dr. Naeem Akbar. And we're going to be wrapping up the book today. And if you guys want to check out more, I'm going to update the book this weekend. I have not forgotten. I'm going to update it on my website at dr.maat.msu.com. But in the meantime, you can go over there. You can check out some of my blogs. And more importantly, you can check out some of the other RAM books that we have read in the past. And thank you guys all for joining us. And we're going to let the panel introduce themselves.
Peace and love. This is your sister, Dr. Maat. It's a pleasure to be on the platform discussing this wonderful book, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. This was one of the books that woke me up. You know, the first book that started me on my journey of re-Africanizing, or my journey of re-Africanization, was Anthony T. Browder's book, From the Browder File. And the second book that I read was the Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. So this was a very powerful book, packed with a lot of great information. Again, happy to be on the platform, and I'm looking forward to discussing the remainder of the book.
And yes, this is Brother Kahuna, and I am excited about going through this book. This is another book that also woke me up as well. Again, I cannot not stress enough, it is important for all of us to read every one of Dr. Naeem Akbar's book. Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery is a great work that every African should read. It should be taught to every African because it discusses the next level of freedom that we need, our psychological freedom. And thank you for peace and power to everyone on the panel.
All right, so let's hop right on into it. Racial religious. So we're on part 3 of the book. The book is broken into like 3 parts, and so the last part of the book is entitled Racial Religious Imagery and Psychological Confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, and Brother Kaneem, you normally start us off. So Brother Kaneem, go ahead and start us off.
The part I just want to point out is in the 3rd paragraph. The presence of African Americans in positions of political power throughout the northern United States and even the northern parts was a common occurrence before the end of the 1800s. They don't teach that in school. In less than 10 years' time, the Jim Crow laws were enacted, and we found ourselves in almost the same political condition that we were in prior to 1865, or worse. So we need to discuss that. Even what's going on today in our political arena, we keep going around in circles over and over and over again. So we have to address the real issue. And that's what Dr. Naeem Akbar discusses in the rest of this chapter. Just that by itself. We've had a Black president, a Black attorney general. We have Black senators, Black governors, Black mayors, but we still have the same issues in the Black community.
Absolutely. And like you said, we keep going in this circle. So, it's kind of like you feel like we're progressing and we think that we have arrived, and then something happens and we find ourselves back in the same position. And so, as Dr. Naeem Akbar stated in the last paragraph, he says the fact that the clock can be so easily turned back and we repeatedly find ourselves trying to correct the problems which were supposedly resolved may suggest that we're not appropriately recognizing and dealing with the real problem. So what it seems like we're doing is devoting our attention to solving symptoms of the problem and not getting to the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the root is just what we're discussing, right, family? The psychological
Absolutely.
change. So if we don't change the way that we think, then we can make certain changes that may seem overall as change, but then again, it's really not, because we still have the same mindset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, and it goes back to something Dr. Maat said in an earlier session. It's time that we educate our children. Plain and simple. As long as our children are in the educational system of the people who oppress us, we're going to keep going through the same circle over and over again, because they get that mindset and that's what they believe is truth. And
That's
so,
right.
and we just continue the cycle over and over again. I was having a discussion with a young man earlier today about the same issues. And, you vote for the Democrats, then you vote for the Republicans, and there's a Republican Congress, and there's a Democrat. It's the same thing over and over again. And we repeat the same problems. It's time for us as Africans to solve African problems.
Mm. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, brother. I couldn't agree with you more. And so then he goes on to begin talking about or discussing religious imagery.
Yeah.
And so he talked in the first paragraph, he mentions a European psychologist called Jung. And he says that Carl Jung argued for the relevance that symbols, the relevance that symbols have to psychological and mental well-being. And he also identified the impact of their absence in distortion. Now, I have to be honest. When I read this, I had to check myself,
Okay.
because when we were discussing, I believe it was Sharia Lovelace. She came on my platform a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the Confederate flag and the statues that they're now removing. And so I said, I really don't care about the symbols. I care about the substance. But after reading this section, maybe I should care about both, right? Because obviously symbols do have some sort of impact on our psychology. But I remember being so dismissive a few weeks ago. I said, well, I don't care about the symbols. I want the substance. And that substance is full and complete freedom. But after reading this paragraph, the psychologist does have a point that symbols do impact us. They do have some relevance on our psychology and our mental well-being. So I guess that maybe, the removal of the Confederate flag, I don't know, and the statues may do something to change the mentality of the people. So what do you think about that, Sister Lily La Poete? Do you think we should care about both symbols and substance, or just substance? Because my mind was, forget the symbols. If they want to keep a Confederate flag flying, or if they want to keep the statues up, I don't care about that. But after reading this paragraph, he says that these symbols are relevant to psychology, right, and mental wellness. So I
They
guess
definitely are,
Mhm.
Queen. I would have to say that we would have to care about them both, or at least understand the fact that even though we might not care about the symbolism, there are some people who get a rise from the symbolism, because
True.
at the same token, there's people that are really upset about the symbolism being removed. So obviously it meant something to them, or they gained something from it. So we definitely have to be concerned with both. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then we have to think about when people go through certain things and certain symbolism is used in a negative way, and then for them to constantly have to see that symbolism over and over, even though the laws may have changed, that's still going to trigger some type of negative memories and things in people, I would imagine.
Yes.
And I agree to a point. And I'll go back to educating our children and our young adults again. No matter what symbols, if we educate our own children beyond whatever symbol is out there, we'll still have control of the minds of our children. But they can replace every name on every street. They can replace every statue and everything like that. But if the same political structure and psychological structure is still there, we're still in bondage.
Facts.
But yeah, because as a matter of fact, America is going to do that. They're going to take down some of the symbols. That's fine. They're going to change some of the street names and name a couple of buildings after whoever. It doesn't really matter. But the same socio-political structure is still in place that's going to brainwash our children to be subservient, and the same political system that kills us every day and miseducates us every day is still going to be there until we replace it some way, shape, or form. We must replace it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. I agree to a point, but at the same time, we have to do education and educate our children out of this insanity.
We
Oh
do,
yeah.
but if it's not done on a massive scale, you know what I mean,
Right.
then it'll
I
just, you know what I mean, then it still be
Yeah,
like it is now, very hit and miss, to where some households get it and then the majority don't.
I agree. But we have to start somewhere. We've got to start somewhere because not everyone is ready to educate their children. That well, why can't they do it in school? They're not going to teach you your true Black history or freedom in school. Your oppressor is never going to do that. It's not beneficial to them, so it never will. And even if the scary part about economics, let's say that the government gives every Black person $150 million. What really is going to happen? Will we build schools, or we all go out and buy brand new Lexuses and Mercedes? Let's be honest. So it's our mindset that we must take back. That's why we're going through this book again. And I get it. Remove the statues. That's fine. But I agree with you to a point, Dr. Mayotte. Let's get to the substance and change the minds of Africans, and then all those other things will take place, or we won't even care what the symbols are. The Chinese don't care. The Chinese don't care what symbols are here. They still educate their children. The same thing for the Muslims. They don't care what symbols are out there. I'm a Muslim first, and I'm an Arab first, and then I'm an American.
Mm.
We should be African first, and then if we're African and we're a unit, we don't care about what symbols you have. We have our own economic circle, our own economic group, our own social political power, and all those different things. And then we don't care what the government says or does.
And I guess for me, because I'm there, I don't care. But I hear what Sister Alima is saying, like
Yeah,
everyone is not there. So
true.
the symbols, so the symbols impact them, So
That's
I
true.
know, yeah. So I know that I'm an African, and so I could care less. You get what I'm saying? But yeah, but
Not everyone's there.
absolutely, absolutely, everyone isn't there, and so um next he talks about, he says it is important to keep in mind that the image of God which a people or a person possesses will determine the potential limits of their minds. Let me read that again. He says
Yes.
it is important to keep in mind that the image of God which a people or a person possesses will determine the potential limits of their minds. He says
Well,
if he
Mhm.
said, so if people have a narrow image of God, then their minds are narrow. If people believe that the biggest reality, so then he goes on to some examples, but he ends
Yes.
by saying that people with a limited or narrow concept of God then will automatically have a limited or narrow psychology. So panel,
hmm
what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, of course, God is the essence from which all things come,
Mm,
Mhm.
no matter which way in which you view it, right? What you call him or her or whatever it may happen. If that's
mm-hmm.
the way that the Creator is viewed, then quite naturally, yeah, if you have a skewed image of that, it is going to skew your psychology ultimately, because to be God-like is what we all seek in essence. So, I
Right.
mean, no, I get it. I get it.
Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
so
Yes.
then
Go
so
ahead.
then so then he goes, I'm sorry, did you want to add to
No,
that,
no,
brother
go ahead.
Canoe?
No, no,
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
so I'm on page 53 where he says that the 53 second paragraph, he says the human potential is broadened or limited by its concept of God. Thus, if God is anything finite, then it is limited. He says then you already have limited mind. However, if God is infinite, without limits, without boundaries, without deficits or definition, always greater than, you have already expanded your mind to reach for the limits of all things. Such a
Yep.
Mhm.
consciousness of God puts us
Mhm.
into a proper field to grow into our greatest height. Panel, what are
Exactly.
your thoughts on that?
Mhm.
Sum that up perfectly. Exactly. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I was
And
trying to say just then. Exactly.
yes, and because someone else controls our image of what God is, they limit who we believe we are.
That's right.
They
Mm-hmm.
have control of that, and that's why, I keep using the same examples. That's why other ethnic groups do not. They may allow their children to go to school, but on the weekends they educate them that they are the essence of God. And we do not get that. We do not get that, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And so on page 54, he says, the question of particular characteristics, and he's talking about of God, begins to raise a whole variety of questions. So he talks about the ramifications of depicting God as man, God as male. So he says there are considerable problems in making the deity man as opposed to one man. If God
Mhm.
is just a male, then that means there are 50% of human possibilities that God is not. This
Mhm.
means that you have cut off God possibilities and limited your concept. You have introduced an unnatural, and I love the language that he
Yeah.
uses, the unnatural psychology
Yes.
into those who are women who would see themselves less favored because God is of a different gender. Oh my gosh. When
Mhm.
I read that, Sister Alima, I started thinking about the creation story in the Bible and
Yeah. Yes.
how God was referred to as he. So that is the
Mm-hmm.
pronoun, it's
Yep.
he. And then God creates Adam, it says first,
Yep.
right? And then it
Right.
says that God made Adam in his own image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
so you tend to think about things like how the Bible was used to oppress women, because
Yes.
throughout the Bible, there's this constant theme that, well, man was made first, God is man. And so it gave, it gave, I guess, males a tool. The Bible was used as a tool to oppress women. Remember,
Hmm.
God is a man. Man was made first. So now it's introducing this hierarchy, between man and woman. So it's God, male, right? And then you have man, then woman. And so women were oppressed throughout the Bible,
And
right?
don't forget that it blames woman for all of sin.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
that explains every colonizer on this planet. The African tradition, and every African tradition that I have read about, all over Africa, Yoruba, and all the rest of them, there's always a balance of the male and the female. Do all of our African people realize this? That's why it affects your psychology. All of a sudden, like you said, all of a sudden a woman is less than,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not. We're
Mm-hmm.
different, but we're equal. But if your psychology is that you're the reason that sin came on the earth, how will you carry yourself? That's insanity.
Oh, that's misogyny. That's
Yes,
misogyny.
exactly.
So now the woman is responsible for sin.
Yeah,
The woman is responsible for all things bad. I mean, it makes the woman the bad thing. So here comes misogyny. Here comes male chauvinism.
yep,
Hmm.
Here comes patriarchy.
yes,
Yes, because
Because
psychologically, as we're speaking of, they feel that they would be superior. I mean, even the Bible says they are.
right, yep.
exactly. Exactly. And so then he moves on to discuss the impact on the psychology of the portrayed race. So,
Mhm.
okay, so now he says in the second paragraph, the person who looks up and sees his physical characteristics shared by the deity begins to develop the idea that he is exactly like God.
Read that
Or,
again.
so it says the person who looks up and sees his physical characteristics shared by the deity begins to develop the idea that he is exactly like God, or that God is limited to be like him.
Mm, mm, mm.
That reminds me of, well, everyone doesn't know, but we kind of practice quite a few different religions. And we started off kind of like Nuwapian slash Muslim. And my father always used to say to us that ye are gods. So he was
Okay.
like, if you are a God, which it says so in the Bible, anyone who doesn't believe me, but if you are God, he said, then God has to be in the image of you. Because how could I be a God, but then I'm God, but God doesn't look like me? That's why he
Mm-hmm.
always said that,
Hmm.
that part of the Bible was manipulation. But
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
it just reminded me of that.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, Queen. Yes, Queen. Go ahead, Brother Canoe.
No, no. I'm just gonna. You've already read it, because the person who looks up and sees that physical characteristics, they believe that they're God, so they have the right to destroy, to kill, to maim. Again, we go back to the psychology of the African. When you read Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Joseph Benyakinen, the African continent was an open continent for everyone to come to. The colonizer was the opposite of that. They destroyed everything that they came to. They destroyed it. They had no capacity to understand another culture, so they simply destroyed it. They believe that they are God, and that's why they must conquer and destroy everything to control it.
Absolutely.
And he goes on to discuss some people who've done that, who've had that mindset.
Mm.
Yes, he says that we can look at country after country, Belgium, Portugal, France, England.
Hmm.
He said,
Hmm.
and he said, and we
Ooh.
find maniacal conquerors who felt that they had the divine right to rule because they were like God.
Right.
He said, this is revealed in their conviction that conquering was necessary to civilize the heathen, the pagan, the
Mhm.
barbaric world, meaning anyone who doesn't look like us is heathen because we are the ones who are the gods. They were
Mm.
possessed by an unnatural, he says, in a diluted image of themselves. So they felt like they had the divine right to own and to rule. And so we see the God complex in white folks. They felt like they were superior to everyone because of racial iconography.
Yes, and the paragraph on page 55 in my book says Hitler possessed by the image of a blue-eyed, blonde-haired deity, was convinced that the Aryan race was a superior race and that everybody else needed to be destroyed. Napoleon could not rest until he had conquered and subdued the whole world because he felt he was like the Caucasian image that was exhibited throughout his society. So, for the wrong people, when they get the idea of God, they want to simply destroy and control everything. And that's a you can look all over the continent, all over the globe, and see that the fruit of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we see that it's unnatural. He talks about that
Mhm.
on page 56. And he
Mhm.
says that, he says once people get an inflated idea of who they are and what they are, they do not have the capacity to naturally correct themselves. They begin to do things that ultimately destroy themselves, right? Because they have
Yes.
this overinflated idea of who they are, and what they are, and it says that he also says when people unrealistically perceive what they are, they begin to create a situation whereby they cannot naturally correct themselves. So you see with Europeans, they walk around with this God complex or this, sense of superiority. And yeah,
Entitlement.
and they can't correct it. It's no matter what they are exposed to, even if their own white people try to educate them, they just can't correct themselves. It's just like it's like they're so far gone, because of this sense of superiority. And I'm thinking about the coronavirus right now, and
Go
how
ahead. I
I'm
know where you're
looking at,
going. I
yeah,
know where
look,
you're going.
I'm looking at how they, the government wants to shut down, right? Let's shut down the country to keep everyone safe. And so you have white folks running
What
around
about
saying,
our
right, what
rights?
about our rights? And you're looking like, wait a minute. So because they've never been in a situation where they've been, controlled or subdued. And so we see that. We see how they're acting it out with this whole coronavirus situation, that sense of superiority, that sense of entitlement. They who are you to tell me to stay in my home? Oh, no, 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 no. You're infringing
Hmm.
on my rights. Who are you to tell me to wear a mask in the store? You're
Hmm.
infringing on my rights, because white folks aren't used to being told what to do, and they have this God complex. I can
Yeah.
do what I want to do, go where I want to go, say what I want to say, and we see all of this being played out with this in this pandemic.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
And so Dr. Naeem Akbar, before he moves into the next section, he says that the European world is on the verge of self-destruction because it no longer has the capacity to correct itself. It has gotten somehow consumed by its own consumption because it cannot naturally correct and regulate itself. It has
Ooh,
made itself hated by nations around the world because it cannot naturally correct its addiction to excess. It says
yeah.
they are drunk on the idea of being like the image that they portray as God.
Mm, mm, mm.
Mm-hmm.
The they the the right by might. They have the largest militaries, and they will go anywhere in the world and destroy another country if they oppose them. And that's just military. And we talk about the economic systems, it's the exact same thing. We'll put sanctions on certain parts of Africa. We won't loan you any money. Or we'll put sanctions on this country to punish them. We have the power, and we're going to control you because we're God.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Then he gets into the effects of racial images on African Americans. And
Mhm.
he's basically saying the reverse. Like, what do
Yes.
you think happens to you if you are worshiping an image that is not of you? And he's saying that while we are worshiping this Christian imagery, that we are simultaneously worshiping the white man as God as well. What y'all
Mhm.
think about that?
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with him more. I mean, believing that God is white, and as you said in the beginning of the conversation, we're trying to be God-like, right, Sister Alima? So
Yep.
Right?
if God is white and we're trying to be God-like, then we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
be white. So
That's
we're
right.
Yes.
trying to be like white people. So then white people becomes our standard, and
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
and we have to be real. In America, whiteness is the standard.
Yep.
They
Mm-hmm.
set the standard for success. They
Yep.
set the standard for what is ugly, what is pretty. They set
Yep.
the standards. They make the rules and they break the rules.
Yes.
That's right.
What Africans in America, and I'm sure throughout the diaspora, because I don't think
Mhm.
that the problem is just endemic to us or
Of
indigenous
course
to us.
not.
Yeah, so we have Africans. We I'm just thinking we seek white acceptance, we seek white love, we seek white validation. We strive to meet their standards and their expectations. And so, again, it goes back to what you said earlier, Sister Alima, that if we're striving to be God-like and God is white, then we're going to be striving to be like white people.
Yes.
That's right, even subconsciously. Facts.
Yep. 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 And as you said, Dr. Maat, the exact same imagery is being used in Africa. They are flooding Africa with these the same images of a white Jesus, the same images of a white Mary, and all those different things. And the Africans are taught just like we are. They're never taught that Mary's image came from Osset and Asar and Haru. They've never taught that story. They never taught that everything that they're learning in school was copied from Africans in the first place. So if I
Mm-hmm.
keep you psychologically in bondage, then you will always be a slave to me.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely. And I mean, that brings me to the last paragraph on page 58, where he says that, the first psychological necessity of making someone into a slave is to make the person believe that he or she ought to be a slave, which you just said,
Mhm.
Brother
That's it.
Canoe. He says one of the methods for making someone act in an inferior way is to convince him or her psychologically that he or she is inferior. And white
Mhm.
folks have done a hell of a job
Mm,
convincing non-whites that they are inferior, and particularly African people that they are inferior. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in the beginning of the book, Dr. Naeem Akbar says that we have developed a sense of inferiority. And,
yes.
and we have, I mean, as much as we walk around and we act like we have all this self-esteem, Black people subconsciously feel inferior to white people.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I'm sorry.
Facts.
Yeah, we do.
Because it,
We do.
because it's on TV every day. It's in the cartoons. It's in everything. It's in the music. It's control. Music is controlled. TV is controlled. Economics is controlled. Everything is controlled to keep the mind of the black person in subjection.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then we pass on these imageries and thought processes and all of this stuff, as you just mentioned, Brother Canoe, generation to
To
generation
generate,
to generation.
and we have to be the generation that stops this insanity, plain and simple,
Yes.
because it's crazy. This is insane.
Yeah, and my mind just went back to um last year, I believe. Nick Cannon, he has this podcast or this YouTube channel called Cannon Class or Nick's Class or some crap. And there was a clip of an interview he did with Brother Rizza Islam. And during that, he said that white women are a symbol of success. And I remember thinking,
What?
if white women are a symbol of success, then what is the African woman? What is the Black woman then? You get what I'm saying? And so
Yep.
again,
Right.
just going
Yep.
back to
Yep. Yep.
just
Yep.
going back to the idea that we feel like we are inferior, when it comes to white folks. So if she's superior and she's the symbol of success, then what does that make the Black man? I mean, what does that make the Black woman or the African woman? So we do seek white folks. They are our standard for everything. I'm sorry, guys. My mind just went back to that
No,
when we
no,
were
you're
talking
right on.
about, yeah, when we were talking about white people being the standard and being viewed as success and things of that nature. My mind went back to that statement that Nick Cannon made on his podcast. So anyway, moving on to page 59. Dr. Naeem Akbar talks about the famous doll test that was performed by Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife in 1939. And so, for those who aren't familiar with the doll test, it was during the time that they were trying to desegregate schools and they were making arguments as to why schools should be segregated. And so they brought in the renowned psychologist, Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife to discuss the psychological impact that segregation had on Black children. And so during that, Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife, they performed a doll test. And so they had children, and I believe the children were about anywhere from 3 to 5 years of age. And they
Hmm.
presented the children with Black dolls and white dolls, and they asked the Black children questions like, well, which doll is pretty, which doll is smart, which doll is ugly. And so what they noticed is that the doll that was white was giving all of the positive attributes. So the white doll was pretty, the white doll was smart, And even they asked them, well, which one do you want to look like? They chose the white doll. And when he asked the children, well, what doll is ugly? They chose the black doll. Okay. And Dr. Naeem Akbar is saying, hey, we still struggle with this today. We still
Yeah.
struggle with this today. So,
Yeah.
panel, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that this is still prevalent in our community? Do you think it's
Very
gotten
much
better?
so, sis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has gotten better. We see the changes as far as people embracing their features, embracing their natural hair, turning away from the relaxers and turning it away. So we do see it, but overall, it is still an issue that we struggle with, and I think it's going to take some time for us to overcome all of the negative images that have been placed on us, and the stereotypes that have been placed on us that have we have played into, unfortunately.
Very true. And I'll plus one this discussion. The the study they do not talk about. So this study was done in a segregated school. They don't talk about the study that was also done in an all black school. In an all black school, the children chose the black doll instead. So that goes back again to us educating our children. Again, before the 1950s, we as Africans had no choice but to educate our own children, and we had self-esteem. But now that we have segregate, now that segregation is over, all of a sudden we're picking the wrong doll. Again, it's part of psychology. We have to take our children back and take our families back.
Okay, so hold up. Repeat that. I want to make sure I quote what you said, Brother Kadeem. You
Yeah,
said that the doll test was also, you said that it was repeated again in a black school, or?
yeah, exactly. What they don't, so Dr. Nima just talks about one part of it. There's another study that talks about this study in particular, that they did two different tests. They did a test in a non-segregated area and one where a segregated area was, where the children were not segregated. They chose the white doll because they're around other white people and they were, subjected to the psychological, the psychology of oppression. But the children that were in an all black school who had black teachers, black principals, black parents, and all those different things, they chose the black doll. Now, these psychologists know this. We can even bring someone from the Psychological Society that will talk about this. They know exactly what they're doing to black people. They know exactly what they're doing. And they know that if we become self sufficient and we do educate our own children, that we'll liberate ourselves. They know that. It is psychology. There's no doubt to it.
Absolutely. And so that's why it's important to make sure, as you already stated, that we give our children images, positive images,
Absolutely.
that of themselves. And so I want to read a quote, and this is one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries says, "Whoever controls the images controls your
Mhm.
self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision." So,
Mm.
all of what we just said, I mean, I feel like he summarized that literally like in two sentences. So
Yeah.
it's important that we give our children, when they're in school, when they're reading textbooks, when they're looking at the television, when they're watching movies, when they go in department stores, they
Mhm.
need to see images of themselves. They need to see us, not them, but us. And Dr. Anaim Akbar talks about this on the third paragraph on page 59, when he said in the 1960s, that's
Mhm.
what they fought for. The black activists fought
Yeah.
for images of us being put in textbooks and actors
Mhm.
on TV and movies. And he says mannequins in stores and windows. He said they fought for this and said that we have to change this, that these books have to have characters that look like us. And so at the bottom of page 59, he says the seriousness of the Caucasian religious imagery is revealed by the realization of the absence of concern about these images. Almost
Mhm.
almost no one dealt with the representation of God and all of the heavenly hosts in Caucasian flesh. So the problem he's saying is then the issue is that people didn't even question this. So
Exactly.
so you're looking at a white God, you're looking at white heavenly hosts, and it
Yep.
speaks volumes that no one at that particular time even questioned it. We just accepted it.
That, I mean, that just proves that we were under their psychological control. It just proves it, and proves that much more that we have to break that.
Absolutely. And brother Adolfo Kwesi, he's in the chat room. He says there's a church every 50 yards in Ghana, while in the suburbs they
That's
have a. He said they have a white
that's it.
Jesus, and I had to plus one what he said. I had the opportunity to go over to Ghana last May. I took my son over there. We spent 2 weeks in Ghana. We visited 4 cities: Accra, Kumasi, Takoradi, and Cape Coast. And he's right, the images you see over there, even right there in Ghana, the images of Jesus Christ is white. Even when you're riding down the street, I saw billboards of a white Jesus right there in Ghana. So can you imagine what that is doing, how that is psychologically impacting our brothers and sisters in Ghana?
And it's done on purpose. It's done to keep them in subjection. It
The
is done
same
on
in Senegal, it's the same in Johannesburg.
Absolutely. And
purpose.
Sister Lily, I know that you've been to the continent a few times. Did you see this when I believe you went over to Senegal and Gambia, and you went a couple of other places too. You went to Kemet. I think you went to Kemet, you went to South Africa. Did you see a lot of images of Jesus? Did you see a lot of white Jesuses when you were on the continent?
I won't necessarily say I saw a lot of white Jesuses, but I did see a lot of white images. So as far as the ads and you know what I mean, billboards, magazines, commercials, it's flooded with them. So yeah, pretty much it's the same scenario. But definitely the mosque that I saw in Senegal, yeah, Muhammad, of course, he's white.
Hmm. And it's the same thing on every continent. It's just crazy. It's completely insane.
Look, I was talking and my mic was muted. Oh man, I hear I hear some static. Brother Kanum is don't let me. Okay, yeah, it's gone now. Okay. So look, guys, we're going to wrap up right here. We just finished discussing the first half of part 3, and so I would love to come back on next week and finish up the second half of part 3, and then we will be out of the book "Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery." But before we begin, I'm sorry, before we end, Sister Lily, do you have any closing words?
No, just enjoyed the build today. Thank everyone for joining us in the chat. We appreciate you all. I look forward to coming back and completing this build on this powerful book next week. And everyone be positive and be safe. Don't forget, we're still in the middle of a pandemic.
Excellent. And I'll just say that I hope that everyone has the time to read Dr. Naeem Akbar's work. This is a priceless study we're going through. It is what we need to do to free ourselves from this insanity that we're in the midst of. And apparently, it's also needed in Africa, Australia, and every other continent on this, on the planet, to free the African mind. And again, thank you for allowing me to be on the panel, Dr. Maat, and I appreciate that. Peace and love.
All right, family. So join us back here, the same time, same place, next week. Okay. I'm telling you, we've been reading some powerful works. If you missed our previous discussions, you can either access those links from lililapoetespeaks.com, or you can come to my YouTube channel and just type in, or just go to YouTube, type in RAM Book Club, and videos on our previous discussions will pop up. So we've already read Blueprint for Black Power, Powernomics, The Falsification of African Consciousness, The African Personality in America by Dr. Kobe Cambon. Family, go back through this. Go back through our old discussions.
Yes.
Get caught up. I'm telling you, this is some powerful information. And so thank you for joining us. We will be back here next week. Same time, same place. Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.